Okay, my name is Kevin Riddle. I'm here with my wife Anne of almost 43 years of marriage. We are parents to 4 children and who are married and have made wonderful choices in their spouses, and they have given us 19 grandchildren. So we are blessed in many ways. Right now, the 2 of us are managing members of our farming operation, a citrus operation in northeast of Orosi in northern Tulare County. And it's a family operation that's been in our family for generations. We've been farming citrus here at this location for a little over 60 years, and that's what we do. As far as how long has our family been in agriculture and getting into the genealogy of all things, I have found out that both sides of my family go back generations in agriculture. Here in California, my grandfather, Ralph Gilkey, my mom's father, started farming in the Tulare Lake Basin, Tulare Lake area and the Corcoran area in the 1920s. So my dad and his father actually worked for my grandfather, Gilkey, in the 30s. And then my dad married the boss's daughter. So my mom, Hazel Gilkey, was the oldest of 5 children. And my dad worked for my grandfather in that farming operation in the Corcoran area up through the 40s and the 50s. In 1950, they purchased this ranch up here in Orosi as part of the Gilkey operation. And at that time, it was a working cattle operation. And that was my dad's dream. He was a cowboy at heart, and that's what his dream was. And so throughout the decade of the 50s and into the 60s, it was a working cattle operation. It broke my dad's heart, but he turned what was a challenge at the time into deciding that during the 60s he was going to develop this ranch into a working citrus operation. I was born in 1956, and that's how I remember growing up, was working here as a kid on the ranch with my dad. I'm the youngest of 4 children. I'm blessed in many ways. It could have been somebody else, but somehow it ended up falling in my lap. Anne and I grew up in the 70s, late 60s and 70s in junior high and high school during a time what I guess a lot of people would refer to as the Jesus Revolution, Jesus movement. Mm-hmm. We were very fortunate to grow up at a time where revival was needed. I came to know the Lord in 1972 as a sophomore in high school, and I'm sure Ann did somewhere around that time as well. We've developed our faith since that time together. We've had an opportunity as both of us, as our family has grown and they got into school age and got the opportunity to be hired at a local Christian high school, Emmanuel in Reedley. And she worked there for 18 years, and we got a chance to send our 4 children there. And it really helped in terms of bringing us close to the community, the Christian community here locally.
We wouldn't have 19 grandchildren if he wouldn't have guided me to Emmanuel to teach.
Right.
So amazing how one decision can, change your life, and it did.
Well, for me, my faith and how it relates to ag, I can think of one particular instance for sure that I can draw from at a time. My dad passed away when I was pretty young. I was 29. He passed away suddenly, and I was at a point in my life where I was busy raising a young family with my wife, and that's really all I was concerned about. I was the grunt here on the ranch. I was the one that was checking the water, that was wielding the shovel, that was driving the tractors. And my dad was actually making all the decisions. I never expected him to pass away so suddenly. But he did. He did, and it was kind of all dumped in my lap at the time. And I was kind of lost. In 1990, just a few short years after my dad passed away, the citrus industry experienced the most devastating freeze in history. And it was to the point where I had no idea what we were going to do as a family operation, business-wise. It seemed devastating. Didn't really know where to turn to because my dad wasn't there now. And really was a challenge in terms of trusting God to see us through. But seeing other people go through the same thing and other people draw on their faith, relying on neighbors and good friends to mentor me, older gentlemen that mentored me through this, the support of Anne's family, and the rest of us as we went through it. You could really see God working, especially now looking back and reflecting on those days. It was a very difficult time. But we've gone through some very good years too since then. I think our faith is tested every day we walk out the door as farmers, all of us in ag. And yet somehow God provides a way and has a plan for each and every one of us. And sometimes we go through that, some difficult times, and about the only thing you can rely on times like that is your faith. And if you didn't have the faith in God, it'd be really, really that much more difficult.
Well, being a wife of a farmer, you have to be on your knees a lot to pray and consider those trials to be, we're supposed to be joyous in what James says. Consider it all joy, my brothers, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces that endurance. So to have endurance to run the race, I just have to depend on the Lord, because like he said, when he walks out the door, I don't know what's going to happen that day.
The freeze event in 1990 came at a time when I was a little bit younger in my faith and maybe not quite as dependent on God for direction. I recently went through an episode, though, that it really has nothing to do with the farm, the ranch, the farming operation, but a little over a year ago, I had a heart attack. And it happened on a hunting trip back in Colorado. And it could have been a tragic deal. It happened at a time where a lot of events occurred that happened in the right place at the right time with the right people under the right circumstances. And as it turns out, getting to the end, no damage to my heart, avoided surgery, had one stent put in, but I was really close to death. And throughout this whole process, I just had a sense of peace about it. I don't know why. I think 30 years ago when the freeze occurred, I did not have that peace.
Yeah.
I did not have that peace because I was still immature in my faith, and not that I mature in my faith now. I know I have a long way to go, but God did bring a sense of peace and comfort over me. And when my wife and my son showed up the next day, they somehow flew out from Fresno, got there the next day, and they walked through the door. It was like an overwhelming sense of relief. And knowing that God somehow pulled me through this thing, and at that point I was overwhelmed with relief, but I never did lose that sense of peace.
So there you go. God is faithful. He's not done with you yet. So.
No.
Which I have to touch him every day. Think he's still here. Yay.
Yeah.
So we're still supposed to farm together, I guess, and whatever else.
Yeah. History is a big portion of ag, right? We all have a history of a farming operation. In our case, going back to the, the 20s in Corcoran and then up here in Orosi, and generations now, and we still at this point have no idea what God has planned for our future. I would be remiss to not share with the fact that I, like any other father or grandfather, would like to see the operation continue into the next generation and beyond. But I don't know what everybody's plans are. It's not my plan. It's God's plan. And even though I have my hopes that we continue this into the next generation, the Riddle Farms in some form or fashion continues, it really comes down to what God wants. We're trusting God and where it takes us and where we go.